Okay, so during this lesson we've been talking about absolute value. And absolute value, of course, is just how far a number is from zero on a number line. So if we have something like the absolute value of 8, well, that's just going to be positive 8, because if we count on a number line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, well, 8 is 8 away from 0 on a number line. But in the same way, if we have the absolute value of negative 8, well, that's also going to be 8, because negative 8 is still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 away from 0. And it doesn't really matter if it's positive or negative. We're just talking about distance when we're talking about absolute value. So let's talk about how we might use absolute value within the scope of larger mathematical problems. So, for example, if you were to see something like negative 2 plus the absolute value of negative 5. Okay, if you remember, in order of operations, we do parentheses first. So if you've ever seen the acronym PEMDAS, which tells you what steps to do in a mathematical problem first, the P actually comes first, and that stands for parentheses. And absolute value does count as a form of parentheses, so we're going to do the absolute value first. Well, the absolute value of negative 5, of course, is 5. And then we would just drop everything else. So negative 2 plus 5 is our new problem. And negative 2 plus 5, you might be able to do in your head, is actually positive 3. And the reason for that is if you're starting at negative 2 and you're adding 5 to it, you're going in a positive direction, so you have to do 2 first just to get back to 0, and then your remaining 3. So this was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to end up at positive 3. So what if we found an absolute value problem, or an absolute value sign rather, in a multiplication problem? Something like 4 times the absolute value of negative 5 plus 2. Remember, we don't actually need a multiplication sign here, because anytime you see a number next to a series of numbers in a parenthesis, then you're just going to treat it like multiplication. Oh, sorry, I just erased some of our work there. Let's put that back. So this is 4 times the absolute value of negative 5 plus 2. Well, we still do parentheses first, so negative 5 plus 2, that's going to be negative 3. And then we would still have the absolute value sign. We have 4 multiplied by that. So the next thing we need to do is take the absolute value of negative 3, because it's still within the scope of those parentheses, so we still haven't completely simplified that before we can move on to the next step. So the absolute value of negative 3, of course, is 3, so then we're going to have 4 times 3. It could also be written as 4 parenthesis 3, just means the same thing. Remember, we don't need that multiplication sign. And then 4 times 3 is going to be 12. So let's do another one here. All right, let's try to incorporate some division. Let's say we have something like 15 divided by the absolute value of 6 minus 9. Again, we're going to do what's in the parenthesis, or the absolute value, first. So 6 minus 9 is actually negative 3, because you can't take 9 from 6 without going negative. So that becomes negative 3. We still have the absolute value here, and then we have 15 divided by that. So next, you might remember, is just take the absolute value of it, because we still have to get that down to its simplest form where it's in the parenthesis. So we have 15 divided by 3, and that is going to be 5.